Tonight, tempers flare at City Hall over a new vaccination strategy.
My body, my choice.
Yes! Vaccination is voluntary in Canada and is simple. No thank you is all that is required.
A group of anti-vax parents make their voices heard as the city approves a plan to get more kids vaccinated. Plus,
I couldn't believe it. I thought, this is crazy.
Residents of a North York high-rise in shock after their superintendent found human remains in the building's dumpster. And 2 weeks into the federal election campaign, we take a look at what the leaders are promising to tackle climate change. Vaccines, but the debate around it today came with controversy. Several anti-vaccine protesters showed up to protest the city's push to end non-medical exemptions for kids in school. That story from our City Hall reporter, Lauren Pelly.
My body, my choice.
Yes!
Dozens of anti-vaccine parents filled today's meeting, pushing back against Toronto Public Health's stance that Ontario school children should not be allowed to skip vaccines for non-medical reasons.
We all have the freedom to refuse to have our skin broken, our bodies assaulted with an injection against our will.
This is my body and it is my choice. As MC Hammer once said, you can't touch this.
Despite the protests, the city's Board of Health backed a slate of recommendations aimed at combating fears and misinformation around vaccines.
At Toronto Public Health, we will proactively work to prevent the next outbreak rather than wait for it to take place.
The definition of horror is, realizing that you're never going to see your child grow up.
This local mother empathizes with fears about vaccine safety, but after losing one of her children to influenza 3 years ago.
After we found out Jude's cause of death, we looked back and we thought, okay, well, this is May. How many people had the flu before it reached our home? And what if just one of those people had taken extra steps to protect themselves and avoid passing on the flu to others?
Toronto Public Health's newly approved plan pushes for more vaccine education for families and health professionals and more support for people who do suffer rare side effects. But those broader efforts were overshadowed by the board's push to change the policy on exemptions. While the debate happened at City Hall, it's Queen's Park that gets to decide whether to stop allowing Ontario school children to skip vaccines for non-medical reasons. As it stands, the Ministry of Health says it has no plans to change the current approach. Doctors say what matters now is educating people on the truth.
Vaccines are second only to safe food and water in their contribution to doubling our life expectancy over the last century.
Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
There is unease at a North York high-rise near Yonge and the 401 tonight after the building's superintendent made a grisly find in the garbage dumpster. Police later confirming it was human remains. Greg Ross tells us what we know.
After an investigation that lasted most of the day, police have confirmed that human remains were found in a garbage bin behind this apartment building here. They were called in just after 8 o'clock this morning after the superintendent for the building found what he believed to be a human leg in one of the garbage bins. They say the cause of death is unknown and they're treating it as suspicious while waiting for the coroner to provide further details. The forensics unit was on scene. They removed 2 garbage bins from this apartment complex at 105 Harrison Garden Boulevard. They are taking those bins to the lab for further investigation. Residents in the building tell us that at one point today, all of the garbage chutes on each floor of the building were closed and taped off by police for the investigation. At this point, police aren't confirming if they believe that the remains were disposed of down one of the chutes or if those remains were dumped directly into one of the bins. They're also not confirming if the body was intact when they found it. I talked to several residents in this building here, and they tell us that they are in shock.
I couldn't believe it. I thought, this is crazy. I live at Yonge and Shepherd in a nice neighbourhood. Just to think that could happen. So, of course, your mind just starts racing. You think, oh my God, did I hear anything?
This morning, I get a knock at the door just past 11 a.m. and the police officer asked me if I had seen anything unusual Friday till early hours of this morning. And I told him no, and that's when I found out that remains were found in our back garbage bins.
One thing that the residents keep stressing to us is the fact that this is a nice family-oriented neighborhood. It's surrounded by high-end condos here. We did try to talk to the superintendent of this building who made this gruesome discovery. He was not available for comment. We did speak to the owner of the building, and he said the superintendent was very shaken up. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
There are renewed plans tonight to develop one of the last undeveloped parcels of land in Scarborough. The Birchcliff Quarry lands were once used to help make bricks. Now the city is dusting off plans for a new park and more affordable housing. Kelda Yoon has the details.
Just northeast of Victoria Park and Gerrard lie about 7.5 hectares of mostly meadow that have sat undeveloped for decades. A few years ago, plans were underway to develop the Birchcliff Quarry lands into a community park space.
We had an original plan, an idea that we were going to be doing, went to City Council, got all the approvals, and then, which was part of a big box was going to be there, that plan fell through.
Which brings us to this meeting tonight. The city proposing once again to develop a smaller portion of the land into this. A large public park with 120 affordable housing units developed in partnership with Habitat for Humanity.
We have some other smaller parks, but nothing that size. And whether that gets developed into, as he said, splash pads or ice rinks or whatever, it's there for the community.
I think it's better than what was previously proposed.
Ward 20 Councillor Gary Crawford says the previous proposal included a big box retail store along Victoria Park.
I think the community was concerned that they would have a lot of traffic with a big box. That's not going to be there.
But population density is still a concern.
The schools are overcrowded. I think that having more people in the neighborhood is good, but I don't think that the school system is perhaps has the amount of space that we need right now to accommodate more people coming in.
Then there is perhaps the biggest concern for public health.
There's pieces of the property that have been contaminated because the land used to be used as a landfill.
Over the years, this is one well-studied site, and I think, and again with the Ministry and the Environment, I think I'd be confident in ensuring that the professionals will ensure the safety as we're developing this through the whole process.
Crawford says the plan is still in its very early stage and there will be more consultations before final approval. The proposal will go before City Council in November. Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Colette Kennedy's here with the first look at the forecast. Colette, I love it when summer goes into overtime.
I love it too. And that's really what we're getting, right? You know, yesterday, almost a record. We were 0.4 of a degree off from making it a new record with the heat that we saw. Today above seasonal, tomorrow we will be too, and yet this is the first day of fall. So just in terms of what that means, average sunlight hours, I know it's the equinox and we talk in generalities about it being equal day and night, but in the mid-latitudes, actually, we still have 12 hours and 7 minutes and almost an extra minute in seconds there in terms of how much daylight we have. It'll be a few more days yet before we're closer to being equal. If you want to know more about that, go to my Facebook page and I'll give you a little bit more of an explanation of why that happens. This time of year, though, our average daytime high is 19.5, so we are definitely into overtime. Our low, 8.3. And yes, it's not till mid-October that we generally see our first frost, so don't worry too much about that. Some of the highs from today well above seasonal, 5 to 6 degrees. We do still have a few isolated showers and that potential in the overnight hours. Tomorrow morning through the GTA looks generally dry, probably with some sunshine, but then into the afternoon, again, a little more cloud cover and that risk of seeing some isolated showers. Then we get a break, and then the next system coming in where we could see an impact late on Wednesday. I'll talk about that in the 5-day forecast coming up. Overnight tonight, 14 degrees, and tomorrow afternoon, Mike, there you go. It continues, 21. Although a little breezy, those winds will make it feel a bit cooler.
Still, I'll look forward to it. Thanks a lot, Colette.
You're welcome.
We're almost 2 weeks into the federal election campaign, and so far the main party leaders haven't spent a lot of time talking about climate change. Well, as we continue our series called 5 Issues in 5 Weeks, tonight we're looking at what the parties are promising to do to tackle that issue. Here's Shannon Martin.
We owe it to our kids and to ourselves to take care of our environment.
We're going to fight global climate change with a real plan for our environment.
We can fight now. We can act now to take on the climate crisis.
You can't address the climate emergency without taking it seriously.
On this, they all seem to agree,
But so far this campaign, there is few specifics.
But I don't want them to just say, oh yes, we're spending this much or we're doing this much. I want details.
I feel like here we do a lot of talking about stuff, but we don't actually do a lot of action.
As Wayne Gretzky famously said, you have to skate to where the puck is going. Fossil fuels are not where investors are going. They're not where the puck is going.
Perhaps not surprisingly, the party talking the most is the Greens. Elizabeth May announced a massive plan to overhaul transit, banning the sale of gas-powered vehicles by 2030 and making all public transit in Canada zero emission. Well, the rest of the parties haven't said much else yet. One key point uniting them all is sticking to the Paris Agreement. In 2015, Canada committed to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. For how the parties plan to do that, we had to look at some pre-campaign announcements. The Liberals' plan includes phasing out coal power, stopping inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, and banning single-use plastics, though the list of specific items is still in progress. A single-use plastics ban is also part of the NDP's plan, the party also promising $15 billion to retrofit buildings and boosting subsidies for zero-emission vehicles. At the top of the Conservatives' plan, axing the carbon tax. Instead, the party would require heavy emitters to invest in clean technology or research, and the party would create a green tech patent tax credit for businesses.
This needs to be at the top of the agenda.
This political science professor says party leaders better start talking the environment fast.
Stop screwing around. And this is for serious. There is nothing else happening in Canada with the existential crisis of climate change looming. So we know that Canada is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world. We need to start dealing with this right away, which means decarbonizing as quickly as possible and starting to adapt to the effects of climate change.
We're going to be featuring climate change stories all week on CBC Toronto, and we want to hear from our viewers. You tell us, what are the big issues in your neighborhood? You can email us at mygtaelection@cbc.ca or find us on CBC Toronto's Instagram page. Shannon Martin, CBC News, Toronto.
And the arbitrator says enough is enough. I'm not reopening this case. Pay.
And have they paid yet?
They haven't paid.
Delivery drivers for Loblaw are still waiting for their overtime pay 1 year after an arbitrator ruled in their favor. We'll have details on that ruling and the reasons behind the holdup after the break. Loblaws is challenging an order to change the way it pays its drivers. Last year, an arbitrator ruled Canada's largest grocery chain was violating the Employment Standards Act by not paying some of its drivers overtime after they put in more than 44 hours in a week. Now, 1 year later, those drivers are still not being paid the money the ruling says they're entitled to, and that's hitting some families hard. Farah Morale has the story in this CBC exclusive.
This is part of Faisal Osman's morning routine. A hearty breakfast before a long day on the road as a Loblaws transport truck driver.
I have a family of 4, and plus my wife is 5, so, and I have to work hard, in order to feed them, right? So that's why I'm working every day, 12 hours, 11 hours, depends what they have.
Osman says he loves his job, but he only gets paid overtime if he works more than 60 hours a week.
It's very hard now these days, right? So sometimes you try your best, right? Whatever you can to survive.
The 60-hour overtime rule was introduced in 2010, but it violates Ontario's Employment Standards Act. Last September, an arbitrator ruled Loblaws should be following provincial rules and pay overtime to its highway transport drivers after 44 hours of work in a week.
I went from a 52-hour week to a 60-hour week to make $15,000 a year less.
Longtime driver Trevor Enos spent months researching labor laws and filed the original grievance on behalf of drivers at this Cambridge distribution centre. He says he filed it because of the impact the change was having on junior drivers who get paid even less than him.
I just think of the people that I've seen struggle. It's been hard for me because I'm a very caring guy, and Roger's seen me break down emotionally, and I said I can't handle this. I can't stand seeing people struggle.
The ruling should have been a victory for drivers, except nothing's changed.
We're down to the 3rd supplemental award, and the arbitrator says enough is enough. I'm not reopening this case. Pay.
And have they paid yet?
They haven't paid.
No one from Loblaw would speak to us for an interview about this, but we do know the company has applied for what's called a judicial review. And what that means is that it wants to now take this matter to court and get a judge to actually quash the arbitrator's ruling. The company did send us a statement which said that it's calculated how much money is owed to the drivers and it's put that money into a trust account until this matter is dealt with by the courts. Labor lawyer Sunira Chaudhry says the ruling could have bigger implications for other unions.
This is going to impact thousands of employees, if not hundreds of thousands, in terms of employees that might be looking to a decision like this to get them overtime pay sooner. So it's going to have a ripple effect, that's for sure.
At least one other union of Loblaw's drivers is already taking action. Teamsters 91, that represents drivers in Ottawa, has already filed a similar grievance against the company, arguing they too should be paid overtime after 44 hours of work. Meanwhile, no date has been set for the judicial review for the Cambridge employees, so 5 years after filing the grievance, the waiting game continues.
A day doesn't go by where a driver doesn't walk into my office and say, "Where's my money? What are you doing? What's the union doing?"
The wait is especially hard for some. Osman's wife is expecting their 5th child in December.
They can do better than this. That's what I'm hoping and that's what I'm wishing.
Farah Morale, CBC News, Toronto.
Swing and a drive, and this one's going to go. Fast start for the Jays tonight.
The Jays playing at home tonight against the Orioles as they kick off their final home stretch of the season, a sure sign of fall. We'll have your game highlights after the break.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
The Blue Jays hosting Baltimore to start their final week of the season. Jays blowing a 5-0 lead as the Orioles tie it and then going to take the lead in the 8th. But then some bottom of the 9th heroics, starting with Kevin Biggio with a sacrifice fly. This pulls the Jays within 1, followed by Vlad Guerrero Jr. with an RBI single. That ties the game at 9 apiece, sends the game into extra innings. But just a few minutes ago, Baltimore got the go-ahead in the 12th. Chris Davis sent the ball over the wall right now. Going into the bottom of the 12th, the score is 10-9 Baltimore. And the Leafs in Montreal to face the Habs for the first time this preseason. Scoreless first period, but the Leafs are hot in the second. Nick Tan dishes off to Yegor Korshkov, who nets his first goal of the preseason. A few minutes later, Tan looking for Adam Brooks. He is stopped there, but Darren Archibald is there for the rebound, 2-0. Then in the third, Korshkov again racing for the puck. He outmuscles Brad Kulak and buries his second goal of the game. Toronto wins 3-0. Colette Kennedy's back with our extended forecast. I'm just going to ignore the calendar and just go on keep thinking it's summer.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Yeah. It is the first day of fall, but boy, it doesn't necessarily have to feel that way. And you know, meteorological fall started back at the beginning of the month. Hey, we're getting treated to some temperatures above seasonal. Looks like we may be able to keep that going into this season. And through this week, if we just talk about kind of the short-term temperatures, it's just a matter of how much above seasonal. So some days are going to be warmer than others. There's definitely a few days in here where we have a risk of some isolated showers, but including that carrying on tonight and tomorrow afternoon. And Wednesday, kind of the warmest day, it looks like, of the week, but it's going to be a little bit breezy as well. Record height for this date in history, holding since 1959. Close to a record yesterday, didn't quite get there with that high of 30.3 degrees, so pretty significant there. And in terms of our record low, 1974, minus 1.1, we're not worrying anything about that, certainly. A look at the precipitation outlook, and there you go with that risk of just so highly isolated, some of the showers. Tomorrow morning, it looks like the GTA will probably be dry, but a few spotty showers to the north and west, and then it's into the afternoon hours where we could start to get into a little bit of showery activity there. Now, as we go into Wednesday, it starts off quite nice. Gets breezy, though. Those winds are really going to be pulling in from the south, and they'll be quite gusty at times. That's going to push our temperature up. That's why it's kind of the peak day in terms of the heat we'll see this week. And then as the front goes through later in the day, it does look like some of that precipitation kind of breaks up as it comes through the GTA, but still a chance to see some showers and carrying on into Thursday morning. Now, a look at those winds. So more of a westerly flow that we're talking about. Still breezy tonight and tomorrow morning, but they're beginning to ease by tomorrow afternoon, looking a little bit better. And then, as I said, that next system, as it's riding in here towards Wednesday, that's why it's going to be quite a blustery day with gusts up towards 50 kilometers an hour. Southwestern Ontario, your temperatures overnight tonight with some of those breezy conditions, 14 degrees. And then tomorrow, you'll still have a bit of a humidex, but the humidity not too significant. And our lows tonight around the GTA quite similar, 13 to 14 degrees, 15 for you into St. Catharines. Very isolated showers and that risk into tomorrow afternoon as well. And low 20s. Today we were almost up towards 25 degrees, rounded up there. So it is a little different in terms of what you'll feel on Tuesday. There's the spike on Wednesday. Thursday, that chance of showers. And right through the period, again, this time of year, just over 19 degrees is seasonal. So we're ahead of the game, Mike.
Look at all those 20s. That's fantastic. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Before Andrea Martin joined the cast of the legendary Canadian comedy series SCTV, she was a member of the Stratford Festival. Well, tonight the theatre company presented her with its Festival Legacy Award.
I seriously can't think of anyone more deserving of this prestigious award than my beloved friend, the incomparable Andrea Martin.
Come on, thank you. This has been the most surreal and overwhelming evening I think I've ever spent in my life.
You'll no doubt know Martin from SCTV or My Big Fat Greek Wedding or even Good News on Netflix. She's also received 2 Tony Awards for her work on Broadway. She actually holds the record for the greatest number of Tony nominations for a featured actress in a musical, from productions like Pippin, Oklahoma, and Fiddler on the Roof. Martin joined the Stratford Festival Company back in 1978 alongside her friends there, Martin Short and Victor Garber. They both came out tonight to support her. Congratulations to her. Well, this season, now tomorrow, coming up on CBC Radio on Q tomorrow, an interview you want to hear. Most people don't want to go back and re-experience high school again, but that's what Tegan and Sarah are doing, talking about their new memoir and their album, where they revisit that very formative time in their lives. You can hear that tomorrow at 10 a.m. on CBC Radio 1. I'll see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Good night.